brought some questions or can think of some questions during this. I have a couple to get this started. But until then, I'll let our panelists introduce themselves and we'll get started from there.
All right, thank you. I'm Jeff Merritt. I'm a 1989 graduate of Appalachian State with a degree in political science and communications. And I currently am the executive director for PNC Arena in Raleigh, home of the Carolina Hurricanes and the NC State men's basketball.
Should we go ahead and use the microphone, Gelber?
Yes.
Yes? All right.
Talking stick.
Got it. The talking stick.
Yes.
My name's Adam Witten, class of 2004, and do a couple different things in the sports media realm. One, I'm a senior network manager at IMG College in Winston-Salem. It's a nationwide college sports marketing multimedia rights company. We have a broadcast division that specializes in audio broadcasts, play-by-play, college football, college basketball, baseball, college sports pretty much. And I work in operations of those radio networks across the Southeast region. And then secondarily, the football play-by-play announcer here at Appalachian State started just this past fall.
Great. So I guess the first question would be, how did you guys kind of get involved in the sports world? As all these people are aspiring to break in. So what was that interest?
You guys.
All right. Okay. So it really started here. I tried to get one of the things that really was appealing to me about App State was the opportunity to get involved right away, whether it be with the campus radio station, WASU, or the internal athletics department operations on the multimedia side. So really from when I was a freshman, and then it really started ramping up when I was a sophomore, getting involved in the radio network operations with football, with men's basketball. I worked with the women's basketball team for a couple of years. And so getting the hands-on experience, getting the opportunities to work closely with college teams, with head coaches, with media relations directors, with other administrators in the college space, gave me the opportunity to learn how to basically do that job in a responsible way. You can build skills, you can build talent along the way, but getting an opportunity to work into the operations of the athletics department allows you to understand the importance of building a trust, building a reputation, and portraying the right attitude that's going to cause people to develop a trust in you in the work that you do. And so that's really how it got started. The opportunities, the experience that I gathered through working throughout my years as a student gave me the opportunity to really find opportunities and have some options when I graduated.
I guess mine started a similar path, but my old man was a big sports guy. And so growing up, he was an NC State graduate, so we went to a lot of the basketball and football games there, and I just loved it. There was something about the atmosphere and the environment and et cetera that just sort of drew me. So, okay, that's fine. Lots of little boys and lots of little girls like going to basketball and football games with their dad. But as I sort of matured and got a little older and got up here, and had some opportunities at WASU to do some men's basketball and some football. I was never good at it, but it was fun, and that's really what WASU was for, and what college ought to be about is sort of finding things you think you're good at, and then you find out you're not. But you kind of diverge and you move into different directions. But
pretty comfortable holding the mic, I gotta say.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, I work with Chuck Caton. So anyway, over the years, I just kept in the back of my mind going, you love this stuff. My spring breaks up here were spent going to the ACC tournament, sneaking in, or somehow getting a way to get in the tournament, and that sort of spoke to me, and it says things to you about what you really love and what you really like to do. So when I got out of school and found out, I didn't have any real background and didn't major in sports marketing. I was a political science and communications major. So what do you do with that? Well, you talk to people and you try to get yourself positioned around people that are very good at what they do in the sports world or entertainment world, whatever it might be. And so slowly over time, I began to develop sort of a little resume of sports activities. I worked for a PR firm, and we did what was then the Greater Greensboro Open, and also Goodies Pharmaceuticals did NASCAR. They did two NASCAR Winston Cup, Sprint Cup, Nextel, whatever they call it now, races. So I kind of got exposed to it and started to meet people, and then was on the Sports Development Commission for the state of North Carolina, and then started a sports council in in Raleigh as part of my work at the Greater Raleigh Chamber. So sort of led into this when this arena job came open. I had some background and experience, not a college degree, it's pretty important, but I had a lot of background in it. I knew how to write, I knew how to talk to people, I knew how to strategize, I knew how to keep a budget, and I knew how to kind of manage relationships and strategies to improve things. And so part of my job now is keeping the two tenants of our building, the Carolina Hurricanes and NC State, happy with their investment in the building. Also manage the tension between the two, since they both schedule at the same time and both have losing streaks and mad people and winning streaks and happy people and stuff like that. So it is a passion. It is part of my DNA, and that's pretty important when you can find what you really love doing and are able to actually do it for a living.
Great, thanks. So I know, how many people are upperclassmen here? All right, yes.
All right, cool. So most everybody here is upperclassmen. Kind of everybody's worried about getting a job, right? That's kind of why we're here. Kind of doing the things that we're doing. So I know you talked a little bit about it, Jeff. Could you explain a little bit more about how you got your first job?
It's a little different in 1988 than it is now, in that most jobs were, at least that's what I thought, were all want ads in the newspaper. Google it if you don't know what that means. But what you really find is that most good jobs that you're going to find are networked. Somebody's going to tell you about it. So my first job out of school was a press aide to then Governor Jim Martin. I was actually an intern on his campaign, which led into a full-time job in his office for his second term. But that was all because I just happened to have a chance conversation with a friend, because I still was 6-7 hours short of graduation, and there was a field operations job up here for the Martin campaign in 1988. But I went down there to Raleigh to interview with, thankfully, a bunch of Appalachian people that were actually running that campaign, and they found out that I had radio experience and I had written for the newspaper. I'd done a lot of sort of extracurricular stuff while I was up here, and so they said, we got a press aide position available. Do you mind traveling with the governor around the state? And sometimes you have these moments, and I hope all of you will, where so I'm sitting on an airplane flying to Highlands, North Carolina. It's out in the southwest part of the state, and we're on this twin-engine plane. And the governor looks at me and he says, this is 2 weeks after I started, it's my first trip with him. And he said, all right, Jeff, tell me what we're doing. And you know how you can have those little out-of-body experiences and my bio said, 2 weeks ago, you were sitting at your apartment at Bavarian Village, getting drunk with your roommate, watching the Three Stooges, and now the governor of North Carolina is asking you what to do. Whoosh, back to reality. Governor, I really don't know. Let me look. But that was my first job out of school, and it was my favorite job I'll ever have. Notwithstanding what I'm doing now, but it was thrilling and exciting, and I got to meet lots and lots of people, and that's meeting people and impressing upon people that you're actually not. You don't have to be the smartest person in the room. I'm not the smartest person in the room now. But I tried to hang around with lots and lots of people that were smart and could help me out. And it sort of took me a while to learn. That's how you progress. That's how you get to do what you love, is having other people guide you through that, asking them for advice, having them tell you things you don't want to hear but things you need to hear, and being a mentor for you. I mean, I'm very fortunate that sort of well into my 20s, I finally figured out that having a mentor mentors was good, and not just somebody that was my buddy, but somebody that was going to tell me, you're a terrible writer. And I was a bad writer. I'm a good writer now. I ended up working for the Washington Post for a while. So I ended up figuring out how to write. But that's because a mentor said you need to learn how to do it. And so I started reading things by George Plimpton and other really good sports writers, because that was my passion. And I learned how to write. But thankfully somebody told me that. But that's, again, meeting people, proving to them your integrity. You said that earlier about, sort of proving that you can be trusted and proving you can learn things. That's just vital.
Yeah, before I get into my story, I'll kind of piggyback off that by saying that I think we all kind of understand the concept of networking and why it's important. But to me, why it is critical in getting the job that you want is chances are what you do, what you're good at, what you want to do, there are hundreds, thousands of other people out there that can do it. That can do it probably at the level that you can do it. what's going to separate you from those people in a very competitive industry where you're going to be competing with hundreds of other people that want jobs similar to what you want to find. What's going to separate you is whether or not the people that are involved with the position, with hiring the position, know anything about you. A lot of times what could happen in my line of work where people are trying to get on-air broadcast positions, sometimes it's not always about who's the most talented person at calling a game or being on camera or just having a charisma. It's not always about that because there's a lot of people that it's very hard to separate. The differences are very marginal in what people can do skill-wise. But if somebody who's in charge of hiring an executive at a television network or an athletics director somewhere can call somebody and say, hey, what do you know about this person? Have you worked with them? How are they going to fit? And is there somebody out there that's going to be connected to that position that you want that can speak to what you represent, and whether or not, again, you can be trusted, whether you're reliable, whether you're going to have a good attitude, because they're going to say, hey, this is what I need here. I'll never forget this way of putting it. 2 summers ago, we were hiring, our company IMG was hiring the play-by-play announcer at Virginia Tech. They had just lost somebody who had been there for over 25 years, who left to go take the position at UCLA. And the athletics director, who was ultimately going to make the decision of who they were going to hire, put it this way. He said, I'm about to give somebody the keys to a Ferrari, and I need to know if they can drive it. And you can't tell that by listening to somebody on tape or watching them on camera. You just can't get that impression of somebody. So you have to have relationships. You have to be able to introduce yourself and put yourself in front of people that are going to help you to answer that question, whether or not you can drive that Ferrari. That people put a lot of value in these jobs. They're very important. They have to know that somebody responsible is coming into it. And so you have to be able to know that there are people out there that are going to fight for you and be able to tell your story. That being said, my first position really came about because I was able to develop a mentor here at Appalachian. I don't know how many of you know the name, but he was the voice of the Mountaineers here since 2000, David Jackson. I came up working under him for many, many years as a student and then as a full-time employee for a couple of years. And he was a mentor of mine. He hired me to do some on-air work as a sophomore in college. And then he offered me my full-time position after I graduated. I was very fortunate in that when I graduated, a full-time position came open. That's pretty rare, where, especially in college athletics, you can find a position that you're a good fit for is going to come open, and you just kind of slide right into it. So I don't have a story about being on a plane with the governor, but mine was, I got offered the job at a Hickory Crawdads game for like a touring event that we did where we did like Appalachian Spirit Night at the Hickory Crawdads game. And David and I were both working there, and this was in the process of applying for the position. I interviewed for it. I went through the whole process, and then he offered me the job right before the Crawdads game. And then I told him I needed to think it over, and it nearly sent him into a panic attack. So, but that was kind of my story. I worked here for 2 years full time. And then from there went on to, I left the full-time position here to go take a part-time job at the place I am now, because I saw greater opportunity there. The only way I was going to move up here is if David left. And at that point he was still 10, 11 years away from leaving, which is what he did last year. So I could either stick it out in a position where I was grinding and working crazy hours and not making a ton of money, or I could go where maybe there was a much more accelerated path to get to a position that I wanted. And then it all kind of came back full circle, getting an opportunity last fall back up here. So that was kind of my story in going from student to full-time to taking maybe another path after that was a little bit, it's kind of counterintuitive, leaving a full-time position to go take a part-time job in a different city. But it was a leap of faith. I was still pretty young, fresh out of college for a couple of years, and it ended up paying off. So
Awesome. Those are the questions I have.
To get it started. Hopefully you guys came with some more questions. So we'll open it to you guys now. If you have some questions you'd like to answer or ask, go ahead.
My name is Olivia Morton, and what role would you say social media plays in your career?
Well, it's the arena is a publicly owned building. The Hurricanes are a privately owned deal, but the social media is both a blessing and a curse in that world. It's a blessing in that it helps me kind of understand what people think about my building, because my ultimate job is to make sure that the 1.5 million people that come through the gates there every year have a good time, a good safe time, that they tell their friends back in Hickory or Raleigh or Durham or wherever they came from that was a friendly place, the food was good, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also you have to have a little bit of a thick skin, because when we're in a losing streak and we have missed the playoffs since 2009 in hockey, for example, and the basketball team just fired its coach, you read social media sometimes, and the people that you love to work with every day are getting beaten up, or people have spread falsehoods. Or one of the big things we're fighting right now is that Pete Carmanos, the owner of the Hurricanes, is going to sell the team and move it to Quebec City or Seattle. It's not going to happen. I know Pete very well, and I know that he's not going to do that. And that's why he hadn't sold. The team's been for sale for a long, long time, and the reason he hadn't sold it, I believe, is because he didn't want it to leave Raleigh. He didn't want to leave North Carolina. But that's not. But the social media does tell you kind of what's going on out there. But again, you have to kind of ferret through the chaff, because there's sometimes very misinformed people that just they love to jerk your chain, or they love to get something started, or they love to be the person that said, I broke this story. Well, it's false. Yeah, you were the first person to do it, and 20,000 people retweeted it, or Snapchatted it, or whatever they do, to how old I am. But it's also just a reality, particularly when you're in a high-profile kind of gig, like working around a Division I men's basketball team and a professional hockey team.
I would say keep this in mind when it comes to social media and your job. Not even your job, just your life. It can take 20 years to build a reputation. It can take 20 seconds to destroy it. And social media is the way to do it. You do the wrong thing on social media, doesn't matter your body of work prior to that, you can be gone from whatever you're doing if you do not represent the people that you're working for in the right way. That being said, social media is in the work that I do, which is a little bit more performance based on air, mostly on the audio side though. It's a way to stay relevant with younger audiences. More people go to Facebook than any other site on the internet. And we are continuously in an on-demand world when it comes to content. And while primarily what I do is play-by-play live on radio stations, websites, apps, all various platforms, it's important to know that it's okay to reach and engage your audience in the social media space. And if you're not doing that consistently, then really, for me, as somebody that does football games, I'm only engaging with the Appalachian football audience once a week. And that's just not enough. People want more information. They want it more frequently. And you have to make it as easy and convenient for them to consume. And so, for me, an example would be I can use a social media account to offer commentary, not necessarily like strident opinions on things, because that's not really the line of work that I'm on. I'm not a talk show host. But I can offer observations. I can offer audio content on our social media platform. This year, we post all of our best content from our broadcast on various social media accounts through App State Sports, through our Sports Network account, through my own account. We post highlights from the game. We post interviews, sound bites. We have a Tuesday night talk show that we try to make available on demand as much as possible as well. And social media is a great way to push that out, because that's where you're going to reach most people. So if you can get your content out via Facebook, via Twitter, and then photos and other video items on Instagram and all the other accounts that are out there, It's a way to stay relevant, but more than anything, it can be a career ender. Understand that. So think about the risk reward of what you're doing on Twitter, because you can get yourself into some pretty hot water if you don't use it the right way.
Let me follow up something. The internet is forever too. Delete means nothing in some respects, and so when you are applying for a job, you'll really be surprised in some instances that they want to see your social media accounts, and they may not even ask you for a password. And in some respects, you don't need one. I mean, I can find anybody probably on the LinkedIn or Twitter or whatever, Facebook that I want to, and at least get a picture of, does this person, am I really going to hire this person because they're constantly complaining and whining and, or whatever, or they post racist or otherwise dangerous material. I don't. In my position, I don't hire very many people, so it's not often that I have to do that. But when I do, unfortunately, it can paint a picture of who you are. Now, it doesn't bother me a bit if I go in there and you post all these recipes or you talk about your cat or something, and that doesn't bother me. It just kind of tells me who you are, and that's fine. But if you're posting, I hate Obama, or I hate Trump, or I hate this, or I hate that, it just sours me to no end, and it's unfair, because maybe you're the best bean counter ever, or you're the best radio play-by-play guy ever, or whatever. But now I've got to think of you as part of my team. And am I really going to want somebody part of my team that takes the time at 3:02 in the afternoon, and I don't think I did the math on that when that meant you were supposed to be at work, complaining about the President of the United States? I just don't have time for that. And I don't want my team, I don't want anybody that works with me to have to worry about. We all have diverse opinions, and that's great. I mean, the world is a better place because people don't all think alike. But again, I'm making sure that when I'm hiring somebody that is going to fit well, that's going to take the blows when we have a bad night or when things don't go well, but is also going to cheer on when we do have good times. But at the same time, is going to be able to work day to day, the minutia, the paperwork, the answering the phones, the stuff that isn't fun. Are they going to be able to do that and not drive their coworkers crazy?
Great question.
Awesome, thank you so much.
Yeah, I got a question for you. In the world of broadcasting, we all have our teams that we work for and stuff like that. Do you ever call somebody that's working for another team? Because you can read the stats, you can see which players are stars, but can you ever contact another broadcasting person and say, hey, is there somebody that stands out that's kind of playing under the radar, so when I'm broadcasting my game, I can talk about them? And it's vice versa, and we can do the same thing with our players on their broadcasting station. Is that networking? Does that happen throughout the week?
Yeah, it's a good question. It does, and it's critically important to find a way to. You're not looking for inside information. You're basically just looking for stories, things that you're not seeing in a box score or on a website. I can just kind of speak to what I try to do, which is. Now, in television, especially like the very high-end network television, what they do is they will set up meetings with coaches and players the day before. So, for example, when App played Miami in football this year, the crew that was here doing the game on ESPN set up meetings on Friday afternoon with Scott Satterfield, offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, potentially with a couple of players, but they do that for that reason, to be able to find out, okay, here's some things that I've noticed on paper, what's the real story here? Or give us some good background information on this player or that player, or, things that you're not going to know if you're not here on a daily basis. And so, ESPN, they come in for 36 hours, 48 hours, and then they're gone. They're not here every day watching practice, talking to coaches, and so it's important for them to be able to sit down and gather some information to to be able to tell the appropriate story, and not just stuff that they're seeing on paper. For me, on the radio broadcast side, what I try to do is I try to talk to the opposing radio broadcaster, because that person or somebody that works on that crew is going to be someone that's around that team day in and day out. You can talk to the coaches, you can talk to the players, but if you're coming at them from the other side of the field, they're not going to give you a lot. That's just reality. I mean, it sounds cool to be able to say, hey, I spoke with the opposing head coach, but they're not going to give you anything. And so, yeah, it may sound cool to be able to say, like, hey, in our preparation, we talked with this coach or this player on the other team. They're not giving you anything. The radio play-by-play announcer, they're not going to give away secrets, but they'll give you a lot more than what the players are going to give you. They'll be able to say, hey, this is what this guy has been struggling with last few weeks. For example, I'll ask a question if App's getting ready to play a team and it just looks like offensively they're just crushing it the last 3 weeks. The numbers are incredible. They're beating teams by 40 points per game. I may ask them, I was like, what's the Achilles heel of this team? And you can look at it statistically, but numbers don't always tell the whole story. But if a radio play-by-play announcer who's been watching trends and seeing how this team's been playing the last 3 weeks, they can say, well, this is kind of where they're a little bit weak. This is where if you take advantage of this, you may be able to have success. And that's just based on observations he's had. That's not giving away any secrets from the film room or anything like that. So it's very important, because if you don't do that, all you're really getting is what you see written about or stats from a box score. What you can do is you can watch old games, but again, you're just seeing things on tape, on paper. If you want the full story, talking to somebody from the other side, I tend to trust the radio broadcasters more than about anybody else. The writers that cover the team, the beat writers that are there, they're always very helpful. They may give you a little bit more because they're not affiliated with the school. They don't work for the school. The radio play-by-play announcers do, and so maybe they're a little bit more guarded. But somebody that you can find that's been around the team every single week, going to practices, they know the stories better than anybody, that's where the information is going to be valuable. But it is extremely important, because at the end of the day, when you're a broadcaster, you're trying to tell a story. And if you don't have all the information, or if you can't frame it with as much context as possible, then you're not doing your job as well as you could be. Good question.
Next question.
Tyler Coates. My question is for both of you guys, and it's just about what goes into like your job daily, but also like weekly. What are some things that you guys especially look forward to that gets you out of bed every morning, but some things maybe you don't like as much, but and how it goes like, just every day?
Yeah. First of all, I'm hoping that since most of you guys and girls are here in this room for sports, you do it because you have a passion for it. And maybe you want to get into an industry where, you don't feel like you're going to work every day. For me personally, I feel blessed that I don't feel like I have a job. I feel like I'm just going in and doing something that I enjoy. It doesn't feel like work. That being said, there are things that you mentioned, minutia and things like that have to get done. It's going to be like that in any business. Anything you do, there's going to be things that you don't enjoy. For me, what I look forward to, the Saturdays, the football games, the Saturdays. There's a lot of grinding and preparation and hours of poring over notes and tapes and conversations and all these things to get ready for a game, and it's a lot, and it can make your brain feel like mush by the time that the week is over. But those Saturdays when you get up there and you crank that microphone up and you actually get to do that for a football game, like that's what gets me, and that's what I live for, and that's what I do all the grunt work for. And I think about the past. I've been out of school for over 10 years now. And I think about just all the things that I've done over the past decade plus to get to that point. You're like, man, it's so worth it. So that's the part that I look forward to the most. I enjoy the performance part of it. I do enjoy the working with people part of it as well. I am a manager in my position in IMG in Winston, and so I enjoy helping other people try to get to where they want to be and finding opportunities for them. That being said, my position, my full-time job is an office job. And so there's a lot of data entry, and there's a lot of things like creating formats and dealing with traffic. And I talk to a lot of radio stations around the country, and sometimes, when things go wrong, you get an earful from people about why you messed up their their transmission on their radio station. You know, dead air happens, mistakes happen. That doesn't mean people don't get upset by them. And so that's the stuff that you just got to kind of deal with, and you try to keep a level head about. I mentioned being responsible and knowing that people can trust you in sensitive situations. When you've got a general manager of a radio station cussing you out because something got screwed up on your broadcast of a game and they had dead air for 5 minutes, you can't sit there and just start MFing them right back. I mean, that's just not going to fly, and that's a poor representation of your company, not just you, but your company as well. So you do deal with a lot of that. You deal with a lot of minutia, a lot of quote unquote busy work, but it's all important. It's not, you don't do it because it's not important. It is part of what makes what makes it all go. But yeah, you deal with some good and bad, but I think, you know, I try to stay in this line of work because there's a lot more good, and the highs are really, really high, and they're worth kind of going through all of it.
Yeah, my answer's similar. Game night, game days are just, you know, I've probably been to 500 hockey games now, and over the course of my career, and as a fan, it never gets old to watch the face-off. It never gets old to watch the center court tip during basketball. We've had the NCAA in my building a couple times. It just, you know, growing up as a kid in North Carolina watching ACC basketball or NCAA basketball was the big deal. So it's my Super Bowl, and I get to relive that over and over and over again. And then you have an experience like it just happened to me last Sunday, where we had Stevie Nicks and the Pretenders in the building for a concert. And so I saw Stevie Nicks for the first time I can tell you exactly when. It was July of 1983 at the Greensboro Coliseum. She was on I think it was the Belladonna tour. Anyway, ninth row, right? I'm 16 years old. Flash forward 34 years, and she is singing the same song that I saw her sing when I was just a 16-year-old ticket buyer. Now she's in a building that I work in. And if that doesn't kind of get you, you know, your soul fulfilled, you don't need to be in this business at all. And so but that happens to me constantly. Now, again, just like you said, there's spreadsheets, there's angry people, there's you know, bad social media things that I got to deal with. I take that home sometimes. You know, there are days when I've got somebody cursing me out for something that either I was responsible for directly or had zero to do with, but I can either be the guy that takes responsibility and fixes the problem, or I can be the guy that passes it on. I choose to be the guy that tries to take responsibility and fix the problem, because I don't like to pass problems on to other people. But if you're responsible for it, I'll track you down and make you feel a little pain too. But the idea is to fix the problem and not let it happen again. I'm joking, and for the most part, I'm the guy that's trying to learn. Even 6 years into my job at the arena, I learn something new every single day from the people that I'm fortunate enough to work with. But yeah, the highs are really big, and they get you through some of the big lows. And you know, you have to also be you know, broadcaster or not. Your hours are odd, and you're going to give up some stuff that your buddies are probably doing. I worked till 9:30 something last night, then got in my car at 5 o'clock this morning to come here. I was passionate about coming here. This excites me. I wanted to do it. And we're in a playoff stretch, and so I wanted to stay for that every minute of that game. Last night we ended up winning, but I love it, and it's, you know, and I give up a lot of stuff. And my children are both in college, so I'm not giving up soccer and school plays and teacher conferences. That would be a different maybe comment if I were 35 doing this. I'm 51 and my kids are gone. So, but it takes you have to also be willing to give up some nights and weekends and holidays and vacations and things like that.
Good question. Next one. Merritt?
What's the biggest mistake that you say people our age make trying to get into this industry?
Oh, that's a great question. Not well. Yeah, thanks. You're my new best friend. I would say there's several. I don't know that there's a big one. I mean, sort of being lackadaisical about the process. When I hire for a position, I always put my name, phone number, and email in it. So don't call me on the phone and say, "May I speak with Mrs. Merritt, please?" I'm done with you. It's in the pay. It's in the ad. Or you say you want to work for the RBC Center. We haven't been the RBC Center since March of 2012. So you're not doing your homework either. But so being a little laissez-faire about your on the other hand, the person that usually gets through my gatekeeper, and I've got a really good gatekeeper in Angie, is the person that has said has made my gatekeeper, or me if I answer the phone or go through my email, cut through that and say, I'm not just passionate, I really want to work in sports. That's a cliche. I bet how many people do you hear from that go right into the circular file that say, I really want to work for sports, I'm passionate about
There
it.
are people out there with like 25 dream jobs.
Oh yeah. Every day is different. But tell me why. Cut through it, and don't be afraid to tell me that. I like people working in the arena that are passionate about hockey or basketball or rock or rap or country or whatever it might be. But one of the bigger mistakes I see is when they just say, I just can't wait to work in sports and I just love sports. Well, tell me you love sports, but tell me why, and tell me what you're willing to kind of do to get there, which is work long hours, put up with stuff. You're going to clean up some spilled beers some nights in an arena job. You're going to have to listen to general managers from WIOZ in Southern Pines curse you out because they went 5 minutes with dead air and now they owe their sponsors a bunch of back time. But again, the passion is important, but don't oversell it.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's a lot of mistakes you can make on the interview side or when you're trying to get that job. I wouldn't say this is the biggest mistake, but this is just the first one that kind of pops in my mind because I've kind of seen the way, especially from the broadcast side, the way things are trending. Don't be I think people maybe make the mistake of shooting for that full-time position right away. Don't be afraid to freelance for a couple of reasons. One, you can try a bunch of different things. You can have a little bit more control of your situation and your lifestyle and your location. I have, my job here at App State is a freelance position. I'm an independent contractor with the athletics department doing football games. And it gives me a little bit more, my role is very defined. It's all in writing. And it allows me the opportunity, you brought up the family situation. I'm 35 and my kids are very, very young. I have 2 boys, one's 3 and one's 9 months. And we live in, my family and I live in Winston-Salem, and we love Winston-Salem. And doing a freelance position with App State gave me the opportunity to keep my family in a place that we really liked. I didn't have to move my family somewhere else. So it gave me much more control of my situation. So I would say don't just look at full-time positions that are out there. Skill sets in broadcasting and sports media, whether it's writing, whether it's performance, whether it's production, management, operations, there are opportunities out there to freelance. And a lot of times you're going to have more options if you want to freelance because the full-time jobs, they're not ubiquitous in this line of work. They're not. And you can try a bunch of different things if you freelance. We offer a lot of freelance opportunities at IMG, and we have people that work in our network studios doing broadcast work, and then they also work at a radio station doing board op for a morning show, and then maybe they go off and they do some writing on the side for the Greensboro News and Record newspaper. You can't do all that if you're full-time. And then I'll give you another example. We have somebody who's part-time with us, so they're a freelancer, they're an independent contractor with us, and he is what we call a seasonal producer. So he works 9 months during football, basketball season on a contract position. He works 20 to 25 hours in our office. But because he's independent contractor, he's not a full-time employee of ours. He is also the broadcaster for East Carolina baseball during the spring. And if he was full-time with us, he wouldn't have that opportunity because he wouldn't be able to go every weekend to do ECU baseball games during the spring. So, being a freelancer gives him the opportunity to look at other options. So I would say maybe the mistake would be thinking that you have to get a full-time job right off the bat. Freelancing is not a bad thing. It requires a little bit more effort to try to maybe cobble things together to make ends meet, but it gives you a chance to try a bunch of different options, a little bit more control of your situation, your location, your schedule, and I think at the end of the day, it'll maybe give you a lot more experience early on than just a full-time position. Full-time's great, gives you great security, gives you a nice in, and potentially great upward mobility with a company if you want to be there. But if you don't find the right fit, freelance. It's a great way to get started.
Let me follow up too. In the just sports and entertainment business, one of the things that I see, and I don't work for the Hurricanes, but they have a lot of people that work on the floor that I do. For example, a lot of their sales and marketing folks. One of the ways that I can tell if you're going to be successful or not, and again, they don't work for me, I don't work for them, is how friendly you are to people you don't have to be friendly to, like the custodians or the security people or people like that. And if you're not going to be friendly to those people, you're probably not going to be friendly to the fan that's upset about something or the ticket buyer that's upset about something. But also, if you're too good to throw T-shirts out at halftime or do some of that little stuff like, take the 9-year-old down to the court so that he can get his picture made at the end zone and because it's his birthday, or the mascot's sick and you just happen to fit you're about the same size as the mascot's outfit. But just like you said, there's no shame in working a part-time job at a minor league hockey team, or the Asheville Tourists or something like that. There's no shame in that. And then working at McDonald's at night, you just sometimes have to do that if you're following your dream. And you'll look back, maybe just 2 years, 1 year, 10 years to that time that you were throwing T-shirts out at the Hickory Crawdads game on hot July nights and working at Bojangles in the morning as a learning experience. And it makes you appreciate where you may be at the head of a broadcasting Appalachian football or whatever you might end up doing because you took that time to kind of, and I don't say lower yourself because it's not. Throwing T-shirts out makes people happy. You're creating a memory for somebody, and that's really what ultimately what he does and what I do are all about. Creating memories and happiness, and he can't help if we fumble in the end zone and lose a game, but I can't help if the hockey team blows a 3-goal lead and doesn't get in the playoffs. But what I can do and what he does is it's part of quality of life. We do quality of life, memory, happiness stuff, and that'll get you through a lot of those hot summer nights or late nights, or again, knowing that you still have a shift to do it at Bojangles.
With IMG and Learfield kind of being the big dogs in marketing, especially with the collegiate athletics, how much of the process was hiring process was IMG, and how much of it was App State Athletics?
Yeah, so I think my story with App State football is a good lesson in networking because, as I mentioned, I worked here for 2 years in the athletics department after graduating, and then I left and took a part-time position. I was making a decent salary here for someone that was 22 years old at the time, full-time, benefits, enough to support myself at least. And then I left, and the part-time job that I had, I was working just basically as a studio host and producing broadcasts for football games and for basketball games. I was making $100-something per football game and like $65-70 for a basketball game. And I was living in Boone at the time for the first year. So I was driving up and down the mountain from here to Winston-Salem at least once a week, sometimes a couple times a week, just for $125 or whatever it was. But I knew that there was opportunity there because the thing about a place like IMG is it touches so many schools across the country, from ACC, SEC, Pac-12, every major conference, and several schools within those conferences. And so I knew there was opportunity to work with and get to meet a lot of people that worked at all these various schools and work with a lot of talented people at the same time. Well, when I started working there, the executive in charge of sales at the company was Doug Gillen. the athletics director here at Appalachian State. And so I met Doug Gillen and got to know Doug Gillen by working there. We had a 3-on-3 basketball league because our office in downtown Winston-Salem is a basketball court in the lobby. And we had a little 3-on-3 league that we played after work, and Doug and I played on the same team. And that's how he and I got to know each other. And that's not why he hired me, but he knew who I was. And I had a good resume. I had a lot of experience from my time at IMG. But ultimately, and each school is unique. I can only speak to Appalachian in that the athletics department is pretty much in charge of the operations when it comes to radio. And so it was ultimately their decision. But I had good relationships with people here from the time that I was around. And I knew Doug Gillen, and he knew me, and he was close with my boss at IMG. And so he could actually talk to the person that I report to and be able to ask the question, is Adam going to be a good fit for this position? You know, based on what you've seen him do over the last several years in managing him, do you trust him in this kind of role? And so IMG and App State worked in concert really to kind of make the hire. But it was a great example of how networking can help you get a position, because there were a lot of people that applied for the job, and I'm sure there were people out there that maybe had better skills than I did. But Doug didn't know any of those people, and he couldn't, because the thing about it, you got to realize when it comes to broadcasting, especially with a team, a lot of times they might evaluate you on your ability to, how do you handle yourself when you travel with a team on the road? How do you handle yourself when you're around a head coach? How do you handle yourself around media relations, in sensitive situations? Can they trust you in those type of opportunities? Do they know that you're not going to go on a road trip and go out and, get hammered the night before a football game and be hungover when you go and do a broadcast the next morning? Do they know that you're not going to do that? Because the reality is, how often are an athletics director and a head coach going to listen to your broadcast? Never, right? Head coach certainly not going to listen. He's listening to his coaches up in the booth the whole time during a game. The athletics director is not going to listen. He's traveling. He's talking to boosters and watching the games and everything. So they're not listening to you live. But what they do see is the way you handle yourself around that. And so that's what networking is going to help you with, the opportunity for somebody to get to know who you are, and then having people that can vouch for you. So, but to answer your question, App State, my contract is with App State, so they were in charge of hiring it. But in a lot of situations, whether it's IMG or Learfield, the school and the multimedia rights holder will work together to identify the right candidates. But in most situations, it's going to come down to what, the school is going to have to approve whatever the recommendation may be, because that's ultimately who you're representing is the school.
I don't know if you have any experience with graduate work out after Appalachian at all, but I know that Jeff does. Could you talk a little bit about your graduate work, maybe how that propelled you, or was it necessary, or kind of your area?
Yeah, I did sort of a non-traditional approach to graduate school. I did not have a stellar undergraduate career at Appalachian. I majored in everything but the classroom. So I graduated with a 2.4 grade point average, ladies and gentlemen. And so graduate school was not an option for me. But I did have a good job out of school, and tell you a little dirty secret. The only one time I've ever been asked for my grade point average, that's when I tried to get into graduate school. So that grade point average isn't quite as important as you think it is. But you didn't hear that from me. But graduate school was an itch that I wanted to scratch, because I knew kind of when I graduated that I had not taken advantage of all the opportunities that I could here academically. And so I was sitting, and I had two little boys at the time. I had a very demanding job. And one of the things that struck me one night was I kept saying to myself, well, I don't have time to go back. I can't go back. And I couldn't go back full time. But I knew that there were lots of part-time opportunities for nice 5 and 6 year tracks to a master's degree. And so one night I'm sitting at home on my easy chair watching Beavis and Butthead at 34 years old and thinking to myself, well, if you have time to watch Beavis and Butthead, you got time to go back to graduate school, son. And so I did. I went back to graduate school. I got a degree in Southern history from NC State. because I just loved history and wanted to prove it. I got a 3.89 grade point average in graduate school, which I never thought I was capable of doing. But what graduate school did for me was it opened up my critical thinking skills again. I had let myself get really, really stale, and had sort of saw the world in a narrower and narrower vision. And so I kind of knew if I was going to accomplish my goals, which were, again, to get in something that I loved and something that I would do for free, I knew I was going to have to not just get the degree, but to open myself up to kind of new things. And so going to the Master of Arts of Liberal Studies was the program at NC State that I ended up doing, and then you design your own major after that. It really opened me up to being able to write better, to think a little better, to research a lot more, to try to be ahead of the game in terms of what I need to do to prepare for a meeting or a presentation or whatever it was that I was responsible for doing at the time. And besides that, it sort of, again, it threw me into some new literature, threw me into some new. I met some fantastic people. I met a guy who was helped found the Black Panther movement in the '60s. He was a professor of mine, one of the best professors I ever had, because he was super fair, super fun, and was super opinionated. And I also had a professor who was Stephen Ambrose's intern when he wrote the biography of Dwight Eisenhower, the general for D-Day and the President of the United States. So all of those things mean nothing to my career except for the fact that I got exposed to those kind of people. I got to their worldview was different from mine. Anytime you can sort of expose yourself to somebody with a different worldview than yours, either A, you're going to get kind of mad at them because they're kind of rotten people, or you're also going to learn something from them, and you're going to find that life is a lot more about people that don't think and look and act like you do, and how that can really make life a little bit better. So that ultimately, the critical thinking skills, it was what graduate school meant for me. And it didn't hurt my resume. It doesn't. It opened some doors for me that may not have been open before. But it was again to sort of stop being a sterile kind of spectator. I wanted to be back in the game. And that's how you did it.
Great. Unfortunately, I think we're out of time here for our session. Thank you guys again so much for coming. Also, I want to remind you there's a senior social tonight at 5 at the Solarium. I think there's light hors d'oeuvres and alcohol. So, yeah, I know. I think most of them will be here. Awesome. So if you guys want to chat a little bit more, ask a couple more questions, I really invite you to that. Thank you guys so much for coming.
Thank you guys.